Small government contractors, specifically defense contractors, are asking one reasonable question. How much does CMMC Level 2 cost? The problem is that question usually leads people to the wrong number because most contractors start off by asking about the assessment fee. But the assessment fee, that's not really the real bill. The real cost is getting your company ready enough to pass. That means scoping your CUI, fixing gaps, documenting controls, training staff, managing vendors, collecting evidence. The list kind of goes on. But the most important part about this is keeping the whole thing running after the certificate is issued. In other words, you're not just buying an audit. You're building a compliant operating model that you have to be able to support and maintain after the certificate is issued. And for small business contractors, small government contractors, small defense contractors, that can get prohibitively expensive quickly. Not because CMMC is some mysterious magic, but because CMMC affects systems, people, contracts, workflows, and revenue. So in this video, what I'm going to do is break down the real cost drivers behind CMMC Level 2 and why the smartest move is not to spend first, it's to scope first. And this is one of the things that we've been seeing recently, is that the clearest signs that the market has changed is not coming from a formal government report. Rather, it's coming from contractor conversations online at networking events. And for years, what the original conversation was about CMC sounded like this. Is this real? Will it get delayed? What level do I need? Is this actually going to show up in contracts? But now, when you're looking at what the questions are, they sound very different because they are. How much will Level 2 cost? Can I get funding? Do I need GCC High? What MSP should I use? How long does certification take? How can I bid and can I bid before I'm certified? That shift in questions matters because contractors are moving from awareness and now into execution. They're no longer just asking whether CMMC matters. They're trying to figure out how to operationalize it without blowing up their budget or losing access to DoD work. Once again, this is a quintessential existential crisis for a lot of government small business contractors. And that's why this topic matters now. CMMC is no longer just a future compliance concern. It's entering the budget conversation, the capture conversation, and the bid eligibility conversation. And once compliance becomes tied to revenue, it stops being an IT side project. It becomes a critical business decision. But even a business decision can come with some cost shock around it. And it's because the first mistake small contractors make is they ask, how much is the assessment? That makes sense. The assessment is visible. It has a quote. It has a C3PAO. It feels official. It is the part that looks like the finishing line. But the assessment is not where the real costs usually begin. The real costs start months earlier when someone finally asks, do we want to get this? Do we need to get this? And if we do, where does our CUI live? Who can access it? Which systems does it touch? Which vendors support it? Is it an email, SharePoints, laptops, portals, backups? Get the message. And this is important because this is where the money starts moving. Because the assessment, that's the final exam. What we're doing right now is the readiness class, the homework, the tutoring, the textbooks. This is where you are preparing for that test that you take at the end. So when someone asks, what does CMMC Level 2 cost? The honest answer and the answer you should remember is it depends on how much work is needed before assessment day. And the biggest cost lever in CMMC Level 2 is scope. Just remember that. Scope, scope, scope. That's the biggest cost lever. Now, scope means the people, systems, devices, applications, locations, and vendors that store, process, or transmit controlled unclassified information. It's a CUI. If CUI is in your email, email matters. If CUI is in SharePoint, SharePoint matters. If CUI is on laptops, those laptops matter. If CUI is in engineering drawings, production files, cloud drives, subcontractor portals, backups, those environments matter too. Every touch point can expand the assessment boundary. And the bigger the boundary, the bigger the cost. That is why your first move should not be buying software. Your first move should be mapping CUI. Where does it enter the company? Where does it go? Who touches it? Where is it stored? How is it transmitted? And most importantly, can you reduce the number of systems and users that handle CUI? Because if CUI is everywhere, CMMC gets prohibitively expensive very quickly. But if you can isolate it into a small, controlled environment, you may be able to reduce cost, complexity, and assessment burden. That is the rule. Remember this. Scope first, spend second. And that is why two companies can say we both need CMMC Level 2 and get completely different quotes. Now, that does not always mean one vendor is reasonable and another is mistaking you for a Fortune 500 company. Come on, you know that, I know that. It may simply mean that these two companies are different. One contractor may have a small CUI enclave, few users, limited system boundary, clean cloud environment, clear policies, documented controls and procedures. The other contractor may have CUI spread across the entire business, an email, on laptops, with subcontractors, unmanaged file shares. The list goes on and on. They're talking about the same CMMC level, but they have very different costs. That variation is driven by scope, architecture, maturity, documentation, tooling, vendor relationships, and how much remediation is actually required. So if someone gives you a serious CMMC cost estimate without first understanding your environment, be careful. It probably isn't a serious CMMC cost estimate, because a serious estimate starts with discovery, not a generic price tag. And this is where the DoD cost estimate is useful, but only if you read the fine print. Because the CMMC program final rule includes an estimated 3-year cost for a small entity pursuing a level 2 C3 PAO certification and affirmation. That estimate is around $104,000 over 3 years. But there's a very important caveat. That estimate does not fully capture the cost to implement and maintain the underlying level 2 security requirements, because DoD assumes contractors should already have implemented NIST SP 800-171 requirements. That assumption matters because many small contractors are not starting from a fully implemented, documented, evidence-ready NIST 800-171 environment. Let's be honest, not everybody meets that level. They may have MFA. They may have endpoint protection. They may have an IT provider. They may even have policies somewhere, maybe in a folder, maybe in a binder, who knows. But that does not mean that they have a complete operating CMMC level 2 environment. So when a contractor hears a government estimate and then sees a much larger real world readiness quote, the gap may be implementation work only. Think about remediation, architecture changes, documentation, managed security, evidence collection, consulting, training, ongoing support. This is real. The published estimate, that's very useful. But for an unprepared contractor, it's not the whole budget. Because small contractors are not buying one thing. The first layer is scoping. That is where you identify CUI, map systems, define the boundary, and decide what actually is in scope. The second layer, well, that's the gap assessment. That's where you compare your current environment against the level 2 requirements aligned to NIST SP 800-171. The third is remediation. That means fixing weaknesses in access control, identity management, endpoint security, logging, backups, encryption, incident response, vendor management, and other controls. The fourth layer is cloud and IT architecture. That may involve GCC High. It may involve a secure workflow. It may involve a secure enclave. It may involve a different MSP model, or it may involve tightening the environment you already have. The fifth level is documentation, system security plan, policies, procedures, asset inventory, access records, training records, evidence. The sixth layer is the assessment. You see how this is getting kind of big when you think about what's going to happen, especially at the very beginning? So if you look at the sixth layer as assessment, that is the part everyone thinks about first. But it should come after readiness. And the seventh layer, that's the one a lot of people don't even think about, is maintenance. Because CMMC is not a one-time event. It has to keep operating after the certificate is issued. That, by my friends, is the cost stack. Assessment is just one layer. The real budget usually starts months before assessment day. And one of the most common CMMC questions is, do I need GCC High? And people usually want a simple yes or no. Unfortunately, you're guessing it, CMMC did not come here to make your life simple. The better answer is this: start with your CUI flow and architecture, then choose the environment. The wrong sequence is this: buy GCC High first, ask scope questions later. That can get expensive fast. The better sequence: map CUI, define the boundary, decide who needs access, identify which systems are in scope, then choose a cloud environment, security tools, and workflow. Because for some contractors, GCC High may be the right move. For others, a limited enclave or controlled workflow may make more sense. The point, by the way, is not that GCC High is bad or you don't need it. The point is that GCC High is not a strategy by itself. Architecture should follow the CUI map. Blanket answers are expensive and usually wrong. Because CMMC is not just about having tools. It's about proving that controls are implemented and operating. That proof becomes evidence. You need a system security plan. You need a system policy. You need procedures. You need an asset inventory. You need access records, training records, log review evidence, vendor files, and you need to show who is responsible for what. This is where a lot of small contractors underestimate the work. They may have technical controls in place, but not organized evidence. They may have a policy, but no proof that that policy is being followed. They may have MFA, but no clear documentation showing where it applies. They may have an MSP, but no clear understanding of which responsibilities belong to the MSP and which responsibilities stay with the contractor. And that last one matters because our IT company handles that. That's not part of the control family. CMMC is a proof documented conversation. If it's not documented, assigned, and evidence, it probably won't survive the assessment. And when we talk about assessments, a C3 PAO assessment should not be the first thing you buy. It should come after readiness. Paying for the assessment too early is like paying for the final exam before opening the textbook. You may learn a lot, but wow, that's an expensive way to discover chapter 1 ever existed. The smarter order is this: readiness review, gap assessment, remediation, evidence pack, internal review. Then you schedule the assessment. The goal is not to discover your biggest gaps on assessment day. That's way too expensive for what C3 PAOs are charging. The goal is to walk into an assessment with a defined scope, organized evidence, trained staff, clear documentation, and confidence that the environment is operating the way your system security plan says it is supposed to operate. That is why assessment preparation matters. Not because paperwork is fun. It's not. Trust me. No one has ever said you know what this Friday night needs: more access control evidence. It matters because the assessment is where the assumptions get tested. And even after certification, the cost does not disappear. This is hugely important because most people forget about this. CMMC has to be maintained. Users change, devices change, vendors change, policy needs updates, evidence needs to be collected, training needs to be repeated, access needs to be reviewed, incidents need to be handled, cloud settings need to be monitored, subcontractors and external service providers need to be managed, and affirmations must stay current. Does that sound like a lot for maintenance? Because it did feel like a lot when I talked about it right now. And this is the biggest mindset shift that small contractors need to make. CMMC is not a binder you create once and forget. It's an operating model. If the environment changes and nobody updates that documentation, you create risk. If employees change and access is not reviewed, you create risk. If vendors touch CUI and responsibilities are not defined, you create risk. So the ongoing cost matters because CMMC is not only about passing. It's about continuing to operate in a way that supports DoD contract eligibility. This part every government contractor needs to understand. CMMC is not just a cybersecurity issue. It's becoming a revenue grade. If a solicitation requires a certain CMMC level, your current status can affect whether you are eligible for a award. So the question is not only, can I afford CMMC? The better question is, can I afford to lose access to DoD work because I waited too long to get certified under the CMMC Level 2 program? That is a business issue. For small defense contractors, CMMC should be tied directly to their capture pipeline. Look at the contracts you want to bid on. Look at the agencies you support. Look at whether you handle FCI or CUI. Look at your subcontracting relationships and look at your timelines. Then build your readiness plan around business impact, not panic. Because waiting until the solicitation drops may be too late. But if you don't even know which types of solicitations you're going after, you may spend a lot of money for nothing, at least at this point in time. Whether or not the federal government moves to have CMMC Level 2 implemented across their spectrum, that's yet to be seen. While it may seem odd to harp on this again, you got to understand this because the action plan that you put forward, that is going to save you money if it's in the right order. And this is the order, because a wrong order, that wastes a lot of money and it wastes a lot of your time. Don't let a tool purchase become your strategy. Start with step 1, scope CUI. Step 2, assess the gaps. Step 3, build a realistic budget. Step 4, fix priority controls. Step 5, assemble evidence. Step 6, schedule the assessment. And step 7, maintain your status. That order matters because if you buy tools before you understand scope, you're probably going to overbuy. If you hire an MSP before you understand responsibility boundaries, you may create confusion. If you schedule an assessment before evidence is ready, you may create unnecessary risk and a lot more costs than you would have to spend. If you migrate the entire company before asking whether a smaller enclave would work, you may spend far more than necessary. The best CMMC cost strategy is not spending the least, it's spending in the right order. Scope first, spend second. That is the difference between a readiness strategy and a panic purchase. Here's the bottom line. Audit fee is not the real bill. The real cost of CMMC Level 2 is building a compliant operating model before the opportunity arrives. That includes scoping, remediation, cloud description, documentation, evidence, managed support, employee training, assessment preparation, and ongoing maintenance. For small contractors, this can become a serious first-year investment. But the answer is not to panic. The answer is sequencing. Start with that CUI, define the boundary, understand the gaps, build that budget, fix what matters, prepare the evidence, then go to assessment. Because CMMC, that's kind of a revenue gate these days. And the companies that connect CMMC readiness to capture strategy will be in a stronger position than the companies that treat it like a last-minute paperwork exercise. And if you're trying to figure out whether you need CMMC Level 2, whether you handle CUI, whether GCC High makes sense, or how much your readiness effort may actually cost, this is where a structured scope and cost plan can help. Now, us at Squared Compass, we've done this a lot because we help government contractors connect compliance readiness to bid eligibility, cost planning, and capture strategy. The goal is not to scare contractors into spending money blindly. The goal is to help contractors understand what is actually in scope, what the real cost drivers are, and how CMMC fits into the larger business development plan. Because CMMC, that's not just cybersecurity anymore. It's now part of how small business defense contractors protect their ability to compete. Now, if you want to learn more, if you want to see how this is done, we have a lot of free resources on our site. Go to squaredcompass.com. And if this video was helpful, please, please, please hit that like button, subscribe. It really helps this channel. And if you have any questions about CMMC, if it's your biggest concern, if it's not your concern, if you got anything, put in the comments below. We try to answer every single comment, or at least respond to every single comment as they come in. As always, thanks for watching.